Hello all you fine folks, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at the ToothPick Pro from FullSpeedRC. Featuring 1106 4500 kV motors, 2535 quad-bladed props, F4 flight controller with an OSD, 12 amp 4-in-1 ESC, full speed TX600 VTX, power switchable from 25 milliwatts to 600 milliwatts. I flew it on 25 milliwatts. Cadix Micro F2 FPV camera. Comes with a 25 volt 470 microfarad capacitor. Bottom plate appears to be 2.5 millimeters. Arms look to be just over 5 millimeters wide. Looks like it's about 120 millimeters motor post to motor post. With the battery gummy and the battery strap I used, it weighs 70 grams. With the GNB 4S 550 milliamp battery, it weighs 142 grams, or real close to it. Comes with 2 different battery straps. I chose to use one with a buckle. Comes with 6 extra props, some foam tape for your battery, some of that magic tape to keep your motor wires down, and full speed stickers. I flew it on my favorite GNB 550 4S batteries. I need to reiterate that I am flying on the lowest power setting for the VTX, 25 milliwatt, and I did this for kind of the same reasons why I do a lot of things, is this is how it comes. So if you don't want to go through the process of unlocking, this is the sort of video reception you can expect. I am running the Fat Shark HDOs along with the rapid fire modules and 2 Luminaire Axie antennas. As I said in the quick roll as well, I am flying 4S 550 milliamp batteries, and many of you probably saw that video Lewis had on Facebook where he showed it taking off, and that was really impressive. And I think looking back at this flight footage, it is fast and it is agile. It's not very heavy. It's kind of like whenever I would fly this thing, or I had seen that video on Facebook, I would think of kind of my old comic book days in the late 70s or early 80s, and how we would oftentimes have these muscle cars that were just ginormous motors on these tiny little cars. Of course, you know, they were all just drawings or whatever, but that's what we envisioned to be a fast car. But I kind of see it that way, this way too, because we don't have a lot of weight, but we sure have quite a bit of motor. We're running those quad-bladed props, and something that's interesting about this is I found there was efficiency gains in moving away from these props. Now, these props aren't necessarily high pitch, but I did fly it on the Gemfan 2540 props, and I found that I could get more flight time, and we'll look at that flight next. So we do several punches of the house. We whiz around the backyard as I normally do. It does come with a tune. I'll go ahead and put that on the screen now, so if anybody happens to tinker or change that, you have that tune. Of course, if you update Betaflight, all bets are off. That tune probably won't work for you very well at all. A lot of things have changed in Betaflight 4, and you have to be very, very careful about just using any old PIDs on Betaflight 4. We do a couple of different passes, and something on those passes you may need to go back and watch. I see camera wobble in there, and I think it has to do with the canopy. It's not secured down in the front very much. It's just got that one screw. I did check to make sure mine is tight, but it's got that TPU print, so you can't necessarily get it tight. So if you have one of these, you might need to use a little extra adhesive on the sides of that TPU canopy in order to keep that wobble from happening if that bothers you. It doesn't always happen. I think in the next flight you'll see that it doesn't occur nearly as often, so there could be a wind or direction element that is causing that wobble to come out. I just thought I should draw your attention to it because I saw it, and you should notice it as well. Just make sure you know exactly what you're getting into when it comes to buying any products that I review here on the channel. One of the things that I don't want to be too harsh, but it surprised me there wasn't more performance, and I really felt like it was the ESC power delivery. It just didn't seem to respond as I would expect an 1106 4500 kV motor to respond, and that was the main reason why I tried different props. I thought, you know, different props might help the motor kind of come to life. You know, we've seen that before. Sometimes you get some props and they just don't perform very well. You get some other props and it performs great. So I wanted to give that a try. There's, of course, a ton of 2.5-inch props up there each try. But my favorite are the Gemfan 2540s, which is in the next flight, which is coming up very shortly. You see we're over 3 minutes, and when I land in these flights, I do go back to the stock screen on the Betaflight OSD so that you can see where my batteries come in. But if you're not flying the exact same batteries and you haven't maintained them in the exact same way I have, your results may be different. Do my little circles trying to get slowed down. That's ridiculous, but funny too. I love watching that stuff. So 3.5, came down at 3.48. Now we're back to 3.56. So I could have flew even longer. That was 3 minutes and 38 seconds. This flight is with the Gemfan 2540 props that I mentioned twice in the previous flight. And I think there are certain segments of this flight where I'm flying more aggressively than I was in the last flight. But you be the judge of that. I've watched this a number of times after picking the flights I was going to use. So I might be off a little bit. I also think the camera represents better in this flight. Maybe it's just the fact that we have different sunlight on this day, and maybe more of it's showing through. I can tell you it was serious hot, probably about 95 degrees. The humidity was through the roof. Actually, this is a flight over my lunch hour, and I had to kind of clean myself up and change my clothes before going back to work. Several people noticed that I had a change of clothes on in the afternoon. But that's what happens when you're trying to get your flights in the heat here, you know, this time of year, June, July, it's going to be getting sticky. And I didn't think the vertical performance changed all that much, but again, you should judge that for yourself. I do think that what this does is it allows you to fly even longer and possibly even more aggressively than we did previously. All the flights come on the same batteries. I got about 10 of those 554S GNB batteries. I like GNB batteries. I think they have good performance, and they bounce back if you run them below 3.5 volts per cell pretty well. And I've kind of gotten a feel for about how far down I can push them and still maintain them in a reasonable manner. One of the things I love to do is the pass here in the back of the yard. I'm always trying to challenge myself to get down really low and get close to that fence line. I know I've received a few comments about that pass that I think it's sometimes people who don't subscribe to the channel but maybe have just seen a flight or two asking me if I intended to get that low or intended to get that close to the fence. And yeah, kind of. I mean, I'm trying to get close, but I don't want to crash. But I guess it's that thrill, maybe, of just knowing you're close and you're going fast, and this could be bad if I catch a motor or an arm on the fence, or something, you know, a new weed grows up back there or something and snags me. It could be a bad thing. Maybe it's that thrill. I don't know. But in this flight, I wasn't necessarily recording this to show it to you. I record almost everything, but after looking through all the flight footage, I did decide that it needed to be included so you have an idea of what sort of flight and flight efficiencies you can get depending upon changing props. I have talked to Lewis before about using gym fan props, and I don't think that's probably going to happen because apparently gym fan props are very, very expensive when comparing them to other props that they can get. I don't know how that can be. I don't have anything to do with the business community over there, but that's what he's told me in the past. So, you know, gym fan props are not that expensive here. I guess they're kind of the same price as all props. I'm a little bit curious about who the prop manufacturer is because I've seen RotorGeeks with these props here recently, I think, and they also look like they could be King Kong or LDARC. So leave your vote, your comment down below as to who would design these props or who you think these props are from. Maybe Lewis will come along and clarify for us and we can choose whether we're correct or not in your vote. You can see these punches are a little bit less dramatic as we get further and further down into flight. And something else that I noticed, as the motors warm up and I fly more and more packs, especially in the heat of summer, that I would get less and less performance. So that's something that if you haven't been flying long might be news to you. But you know, the efficiencies that we might have, we kind of tend to lose in the next flight. Like right now, you see we're at about 3.5 minutes and we're getting low battery. We're coming in right around that 3.5 volts per cell, and we're going to fly until we get down to about 3.43 and then bring it back in and it'll be safe. But the performance as you get the motors warmed up, it just doesn't perform as well. I don't understand why, but I've noticed it, and time again when I get hot days and I go out and fly, the first flight I can just feel like it's more high performance, and then the ninth flight it doesn't feel so high performing. But we've landed, and now we come in at 3.53 volts per cell. So we're in good shape there, and a flight time of over 4 minutes. So I mentioned in this quick roll, I called it magic tape. Frank Brajas actually sent me some recently, and Frank was spot on. Emax sells this. I don't know where else you can get this tape. It seems to stick really well, and the edges of it doesn't come up like all the other tapes I've used. Now, the roll that Frank sent me, he had the ability to cut a roll like in half, and he sent it to me, and I do think that's the tape that I've been talking about for 6-8 months. Also, you notice on the bottom, I'm not using OmaGrip. This is by UAV. It's a company that makes all sorts of different RC stuff. It basically is like OmaGrip, but it's not quite as tacky. You have to clean it up more, or at least in my experience, I have to clean it up more. Also, I added the zip tie back here to make sure my battery ejections did not rip off the pads on the ESC, and my preference would be that the capacitor is secured down a little bit. You know, I don't know that anything's going to happen, but it just doesn't feel like it's secure, and I would prefer to either see it attached directly to battery extension, or the battery leads here. We could heat shrink it down. I don't think we'd really want to put any glue on the standoff in this. You might, but as a manufacturer, I can see why you wouldn't want to do that, because then repairs mean you have to tear that off, and then they run the risk of tearing the capacitor off. But if we can secure that down to the battery lead, that might be good. We've also seen companies add it out here to the end of the battery lead and then shrink wrap it out there for safekeeping. I don't know if it's more effective up here or down here, so I don't know why one manufacturer will choose to do it one way versus another. Of course, I said this in the last toothpick. My preference, again, I have a bias for how I like things. I do not like when our battery straps have to run this way. I don't feel like I get my battery straps secured. I don't feel like I get my batteries secured like I want to because of this sort of mechanism that they've got here. That's why I added these pads, and that's why mine will come in a little bit heavier than yours will. You know, I've got a thicker strap here that I wanted to use, and I wanted to make sure the batteries, they're not free and cheap, so if I don't want them ejecting if I do crash, I can accept that if I crash that I might have damaged the quad, but I would prefer to keep the battery with the quad. That way I just don't lose it because I can't find it, or that it's less likely to get damaged. It shouldn't pick up steam as it leaves the quad. But I don't prefer this style. There's room here, as you can see right here at the top, there's room here to add a short little standoff underneath and to press everything up. Maybe that affects our camera angle in some way. I'm not certain why they're building them this way. Also notice that we have wires, whereas this ESC used to have connectors, and they look like they're soldered on the bottom. They are very, very tiny down there. That's some it's challenging soldering, I'm sure. So keep that in mind when you're changing out a motor, that there aren't connectors. You're going to have to solder these, and they are using the through holes on the ESC in order to connect those, and they are coming across. So you could actually gain some efficiency probably by running your wires directly to the ESC rather than looping them underneath like they have. But this looks tidy. It's almost like, you know, in American marketing, or probably in all sorts of locations, the food that they show us on TV isn't edible. You know, it's got paint on it, and they're using various things to look good, and everybody worries about how their product looks, and that's apparently something Full Speed was worried about. I've got the FR Sky full speed receiver, and you probably heard it calling out low RSSI during my flights, and I'm not far away, so that's something that you need to consider. This receiver, you can buy it with it, and then you know that the range isn't going to be great. Or you can choose to add your own receiver after the fact. The last bit we're going to talk about here is unlocking the VTX. You add power, and then you press this button. I hope my big fingers aren't getting in the way. And there's a button right down here, and I'm pressing it right now. You press and hold that button in for 20 seconds. So count nice and slow, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. You do that for 20 seconds, and then you take the power and you disconnect it, and then you plug it back in, and then you'll be able to change all the different power settings and get clear up to 600 milliwatts. Do be careful, especially in the summertime, if it's hot in your area. Running this on 600 milliwatts, that could create some heat and have some impact on electronic performance. You know, if it's 90 plus degrees where you're flying and you're running 600 milliwatt, that could be a problem. I don't know. I'm being overly cautious there. You know, this isn't about necessarily this product, but really all VTXs. They warm up, so we have to be careful of how warm they are getting and other components around them are getting. I do appreciate that Full Speed used hex screws for all the screws, and they're button heads, so they're rounded off, and you find that those all the way around, except for the flight stack, are hex screws. So I do appreciate that. I guess this one right here also isn't a hex screw, but the ones inside the camera, I just prefer those. They're easier to work with. That way you don't have to worry about stripping it out or having the precise size of screwdriver head that you need, whether it's a number 2 or something else. A hex screw, a hex head always works better for me. I don't know how you feel, but let me know down in the comments below. So personally, if I were looking at the Full Speed product line and I were to try to choose between the ToothPick and the ToothPick Pro, I go ToothPick Pro. And I go ToothPick Pro for 2 reasons. You've got essentially the same components, just different motors and a little thicker carbon fiber frame, and you can get flight time in the 4-minute range, and you get more aggressive flight, in my opinion. I think these motors are also a little bit higher quality. I don't know who makes them for Full Speed, but it seems like in flight these sound a little better than the 1103s that are on the ToothPick. So if you're asking me, would you buy the ToothPick or the ToothPick Pro? I would buy the ToothPick Pro. I believe it performs better and there's more fun to be had. But that's me. That's what I'm looking for. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time. And thank you for watching.